Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder, and today we're playing Scales in the Timeless format. Now the name of the game is Hardened Scales, which gives us an extra +1/+1 counter on every instance of placing +1/+1 counter. So it works well with stuff like Zabaz, it also works with Steel Overseer, so we're trying to play a bunch of +1/+1 counter synergies. We can also generate 1/1 counters with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and do interesting stuff like basically give all of our creatures the Steel Overseer ability, or Hangarback Walkers add counter ability, you know, so there's cool stuff like that. We are running like the poor man's Walking Ballista and Monoskelion, so we'll see if we can get there with this ragtag group of artifacts, and let's jump into some games. Alright, so this is a reasonable hand. Love to see Mox Opal. Maybe we can get an Ancient Tomb with Once Upon a Time and really kick things off. Our opponent has a turn 1 Tamiyo, but they are not done. They also have a Mox Amber, so that's pretty unfortunate. The opponent's like already really going off. Alright, so Drix Interlacer is a card that's new to me, but it's a starting intensity card, and basically whenever they have an artifact ETB, the intensity increases by 1, and they can crack it to draw half of X cards. So, you know, every Tamiyo attack gets them a counter, and every artifact they play, so interesting card draw engine. Alright, so no Ancient Tomb, but we have Strip Mine, Windswept Heath, and Hangarback Walker. We already have like enough spells. I'm going to grab the Strip Mine because we can possibly take them off mana, and we might need the mana ourselves. So just going to lead it with the Fetch Land and Mox Opal. It's unclear if they're going to run like Hand Disruption. Like typically, like if they're a heavy artifact deck, we don't have to worry about like Thoughtseize and stuff, but you never know. Alright, so there's the Interlacer already going off. Tamiyo crashes in. And there's Emery for just 1 mana, so the opponent is just going off already. And they get a nice selection of artifacts to choose from. So already feeling like we're like massively behind right here. Like our Mox Opal won't even be online next turn. So don't love that. The colors in this deck, so we don't need a ton of colors. We need green for Hardened Scales and Once Upon a Times, and red and white for Zabaz. So we have mostly a colorless mana base, but we do need colors. And the tricky part is, Pinnacle Emissary, this could get ugly. The tricky part is you need green on 1 for like to really go off with Scales, you know, so you need like a reasonable density of them, though Once Upon a Time does help a lot. So opponent was able to flip Tamiyo off the back of a Thought Cast, which don't love it flipped Tamiyo, but at least they didn't really go too crazy with Pinnacle Emissary. And so I led with Agatha's Soul Cauldron to combat their Emery. You know, like I didn't put any threats out, but you could see it interrupted their artifact play. So like basically took a Mox Amber, which would have been like a Lotus Petal for them, and it would have represented at least 2 more creatures off the Pinnacle Emissary. So Agatha's Soul Cauldron coming in clutch already. Now I'm thinking about which threat to play. Like obviously Steel Overseer is like really good to get through the summoning sickness. Just get it over with, but I really want to be able to pressure that Tamiyo, so that's why I decided to put Smuggler's Copter into play. So now I'm wondering if I should play a creature or use the Strip Mine. And ultimately I decided just to play another threat out there. Alright, so the Interlacer's accumulating more counters. Aether Spellbomb. Now that is super annoying because that's like an easy way for them to defend the Tamiyo. Alright, but they're actually minusing Tamiyo on the Thought Cast. So basically they're opening the door for Emery to cast something, but I'm not really too worried about what they have in their graveyard. Like, yeah, they're going to get like the boots, you know, but I think it's scarier having them draw 2 cards. So there's Lava Spur Boots. So the opponent has 2 ways to interact with the graveyard. So our Agatha's Soul Cauldron is going to be like really taxed right this game, trying to like control what they're doing. So Thought Monitor gets them some cards, Mishra's Bauble. And you could see how strong the Interlacer is. Like, they're just like, you know, easily piling the counters on it. So it's going to be like an Ancestral Recall once they actually crack it. Alright, so Mishra's Bauble goes off. There's Hardened Scales. Okay, so really glad to have Steel Overseer in play. And notice the opponent has tapped out of blue mana, so they're not going to be able to Spellbomb anything right now. So we could play a creature, crew the Copter, send in with both to make sure Tamiyo dies this turn. It's especially tempting because Spellbomb is down at the moment. it would require us to like Agatha Soul Cauldron on our turn to like save the Steel Overseer. Actually, I don't know if there's any creatures in the... Oh, I think there's an Emery. Okay, so we could do that, but I decided like they have so many... Anyway, I'm still worried about Emery going out, especially with like Mishra's Bauble in there now. So I just sent it with the one attacker, and yeah, the opponent's just going to block because how strong Tamiyo is. So, but yeah, this was a tough call. Like I was really considering attacking with both and helping the, you know, using Soul Cauldron to boost the Steel Overseer if necessary. But I'm trying to figure out if I should activate Overseer right now. I decided it's worth getting the counters on the Copter while it's a creature, and so we're just gonna pass and then keep up Agatha's Soul Cauldron. All right, so the opponent's gonna plus Tamiyo, so at least we don't have to worry about the ultimate for quite some time. All right, Springleaf Drum. Let's see what the opponent does. So the Interlacer is just going off. All right, another Mishra's Bauble. So the opponent is like a super lean deck, and if you can get your legendaries to stick and your Mox Ambers and stuff, then you can survive on these low number of lands, you know. But it's just a little bit risky in like the strip mine era. Though I guess they have like Springleaf Drums and stuff also. Yeah. So once they just get like a little bit of a foothold, then they're usually okay. All right, there's another Springleaf Drum. All right, so Pinnacle Emissary is starting to go off, which is a little concerning. At this point, I was not feeling great about this game. Like, oh, great. Like, the opponent is just has so many resources, so many cards, and they can, you know, hold up Spell Bomb against our stuff. And there's the hammer right there. There's a Kappa Cannoneer, which is really tough because we can't block it. So, or at least, you know, it's trivial for them to make it unblockable. All right, so they have also a couple Pinnacle Emissaries on deck. And so I'm just going to eat something from their graveyard. I'm going to take the Thought Monitor. That's just the most valuable thing. So they're going to attempt to Emery it, but that just gives them permission to cast it. It doesn't like stop us from exiling it. So we get to put some counters on Hangarback Walker. I wanted to make something big enough to punch through their creatures. Now, one thing to note is that the Pinnacle Emissary tokens can only block flyers. So right now, they only have Tamiyo and Kappa Cannoneer on defense. I'm going to put Hangarback Walker into play because it can crew the Smuggler's Copter and it can pick up counters should we activate Steel Overseer. So going to crash in, and considering attacking Tamiyo here, yeah, so basically, yeah, actually I don't know if I love this attack. So Tamiyo's debuff's going to go off. I'm trying to like put some pressure on Tamiyo. The main thing, like I definitely wanted to get the loot with Smuggler's Copter, but the thing is like they have like an infinite army of chump blockers for the Smuggler's Copter. Interestingly, they block with the Tamiyo right there. I actually don't know if that's a really great block by the opponent. Like I can understand like Tamiyo's not doing a whole lot for them. I think they'd be much better suited blocking with one of their tokens, because Tamiyo is one of the few creatures they have that can actually block our ground forces, you know. So, but the opponent takes a chunk of damage right there, and I decide just to strip mine their land. Like they obviously have like a million like Springleaf Drums and stuff, you know. So, but I figured constraining their mana as much as possible is just going to help, because to get another like warped Pinnacle Emissary into play, they have to spend 3 whole mana, you know. So, all right, Tamiyo gets plussed again. There's a Thought Monitor. So they have at least a few blocking creatures. Now, we're starting to get a little worried about the Kappa Cannoneer, because they have a bunch of flying tokens, and once we're low enough life total, the Kappa Cannoneer can just easily finish us off. So it's getting a little scary. All right, so one of the Pinnacle Emissaries is coming back again. At least they had to use an Ancient Tomb for that. That's the one good thing. All right, Lava Spur Boots is going to suit up on the Thought Monitor. And as the opponent ponders their attacks, please conform or shuriken the like button if you like seeing artifact showdowns. We'll see which artifact strategy reigns supreme in this battle. Alright, so we're going to eat a massive hit from the Cannoneer. Also not loving the situation now. So the opponent has 2 creatures that can block our ground forces. I'm going to eat a creature right here to place some counters with Soul Cauldron. So the thing is, we actually have the Emery ability now thanks to Soul Cauldron, but we don't have like any artifacts in our graveyard. So, you know, we could get fancy with Smuggler's Copter, you know, but it's not the kind of battle we're doing right now. The opponent has so much going on. So now I'm really trying to figure. So the opponent's at 11. They have 2 guaranteed creatures that can like block our stuff. It's basically not really worth it to attack with Smuggler's Copter because they'll just block with like a token that they can easily make a million more of. So you could see me like agonizing right here. And there is one more creature in the graveyard. There is a Tamiyo. We don't have any creatures in our graveyard. So I'm basically trying to weigh whether it's worth to attack with the Smuggler's Copter and decide not to. Because we can play like a post-combat creature and have like a blocker up for their big flyer. So going to attack in, and the thing that makes it really complicated is you have to like calculate the Tamiyo debuffs, but then also calculate possibly activating Soul Cauldron to add counters. And so the opponent's blocking in this manner. So we could add 2 counters onto Steel Overseer. Alright, so the opponent's going to crack their bauble. Now, at least we're chewing through some of their forces, but we're just getting like dangerously low right now. Like a 7/7 Kappa Cannoneer on the other side, plus multiple flyers. But we do knock them to 7, and it's going to make it way more risky to use their Ancient Tomb. So I'm going to play Patchwork Automaton, and actually decide not even to let them bother with the... Like, they still have like a reasonably healthy life total at 7. And I just want to like really narrow their options. So I'm just going to pop the Ancient Tomb and pass. So we have Smuggler's Copter up on defense. Opponent's getting 2 fresh cards. So any single artifact means that there's at least an 8/8 Kappa Cannoneer smacking us. And our Copter can block one of the flyers, you know. So I love to see them just drawing cards off Thoughtcast. Like they're not adding artifacts to the board. Alright, so they're going for the Emery. And Agatha's Soul Cauldron has been so clutch this game. So we're going to get rid of the Interlacer in response. Because that's going to, you know, that's a guaranteed artifact for Kappa Cannoneer to start going off. So we're just going to try and make it a little harder for them. Alright, so they're actually minusing Tamiyo. So that's really big. Like, I don't mind them just drawing random cards. Like, they don't have a Pinnacle Emissary in play. And that also means, like, we get a reprieve from the Tamiyo debuff. You know, so our creatures are going to be coming in at full power. Alright, so there's a Pinnacle Emissary, and the opponent can crash in with Kappa Cannoneer, but that probably won't be good. And yeah, the opponent packs it in, so awesome win against an Affinity deck, and on to the next one. Alright, opponent's going to crack the Flooded Strand, blue-black land, and we're going to eat a Thoughtseize right away. So I just sort of assumed they'd take Hardened Scales, but I was shocked to see them take Steel Overseer right there. We're just going to lead with Scales to try and power up all the rest of our stuff and see where we go from there. I wouldn't consider like the 60 that I've assembled here to be like ironclad. Like there's some, like I really want to get the 4th Once Upon a Time in there. And I think the biggest question mark in this deck is like Hangarback Walker. It's really good in certain matchups. Like if you can block and make a bunch of tokens, then activate Steel Overseer. You know, like there's some upsides, but it's just sort of clunky and doesn't attack very well. And there's a ton of exile removal with Timeless, you know. So not loving our situation right now. So the opponent show and tells and attracts into play. We get a Smuggler's Copter. All right, and then they're passing back to us. Now the one small Glimmerwasp of hope, you could say, that we have is that we have a Scales in play and a Patchwork Automaton, so like it can grow pretty quickly. Not to mention Zabaz can let us do the block, you know, sort of like block sack basically, to deny them attracts a lifelink, you know. So we do have like a little bit of wiggle room, but it's pretty bad because the opponent has like a 7/7 Death Touch lifelinker in play, and they like restock their hand. So Smuggler's Copter is going to get Patchwork Automaton up to a 5/5. And I think about it here for a while and eventually decide, you know, I'm just going to rip an X = 0 Hangarback Walker just to get 2 counters on the Automaton, because we have no profitable means of blocking the Atraxa right now. Like, double blocking with the Smuggler's Copters means they're both just, it's just not a good proposition. So wanted to at least get the Automaton big enough to crash through an Atraxa and at least negate like one of the lifelink hits that's about to happen. So, alright, Lauren revealed it's going to get them a Surveil land. They still have a lot of ammo though, so I'm not loving this, and the opponent is obviously going to go up to 13. Alright, they're going to play Assemble the Team. And the thing is that they've played so much card selection, they're probably like well on their way to getting where they need to. Now, if we had an extra mana open, we could have done the whole block and then destroy it, the blocker, to deny them lifelink, you know? So trying to figure out what to do here, and it seems like just attacking with Patchwork is... And so I was shocked to see them block with the Traxa, but anyway, the thing is, they've taken out our biggest threat and are all the way back at 20 life. So just not loving the situation. Alright, so they found another show and tell, and there's the Omniscience. So we have to see if they can bring it home, and with the Traxa plus Dig Through Time in hand, and who knows what they're going to grab, that's enough for me. So we're on to the next game. Ancient Tomb hand plus Once Upon a Time is excellent. So we have to see, alright, so Chromox, let's see what the opponent has in store for us. And they're going to tuck something. Alright, so it's Born Upon a Wind. So already I'm like, alright, I guess it's another show and tell deck. So our deck is like extremely fair. I mean, you've seen it in action already. It struggles against the combo decks. Like, the best way it has to like rumble with them is like Ancient Tomb out a couple threats and then Strip Mine a couple lands, and you know, that's the best way it can fight against combo. So you could maybe try and put some like Thought Seizes in there or something. It's not really conducive to like our game plan, you know. So you just have to know going in, if you play this deck, it's a really tough combo matchup. So I thought for a second we were going to eat a Mana Drain right there, but opponent ends up surveilling away a Dig Through Time. Alright, so they shock in a land and pass to us. And once you see Born Upon a Wind, like, it's almost just guaranteed show and tell. Like, some of the other cards have overlap with control decks, but that one doesn't really have like a place in control, you know. So I'm mulling over the lands here, trying to figure out what to do. Going to play Automaton. I'm trying to see like if this is going to get hit by a Mana Drain. Alright, so the opponent actually just swords our Automaton that's in play. So we're going to get Automaton and then an Ozolith and move on with our lives. So I'm like not loving this spot right here. Like, we just have like no pressure on them, and they've been able to just sort of fire off some card selection and stuff. Ancient Tomb from the opponent, and they're going to fire off a Stock Up, which is really powerful card. They're going to get some really strong selection right there. Alright, Starting Town. I've been like spooked by Starting Town so many times because I just keep thinking of it like the fast lands, like counting how many lands you have in play, but it actually doesn't do that. It counts how many turns you've taken, and it's not always obvious on Arena like how many turns you've, especially like if you're strip mining each other, you know, like you can't just count lands to know what turn it is. So be very careful if you run a Starting Town, because you may think it's coming into play on tap because you only have one land in play, but it's like turn 5, you know. So alright, Soul Cauldron. I'm going to just eat something from the graveyard. Maybe it'll depower a Dig Through Time. The opponent could have cracked their fetch to like, well, actually no, they don't have enough islands to grab like a Mystic Sanctuary, so that was pretty safe exile right there. Hardened Scales is really interesting. So the opponent is at 11, so we're like pretty close. Because like Monoskelion can like throw a little bit of damage. So I'm going to cast Once Upon a Time here, just try and fish up another artifact for Patchwork Automaton. The Strip Mine is tempting, but I already played a land, so that's an argument for not playing your lands out, because you might find a Strip Mine or something like that. So going to put Hardened Scales into play, because that's going to make everything go way better. We're going to put them under like massive pressure with this Patchwork Automaton. Alright, so Scales resolves, so now I gotta get our second mana to get Hangarback Walker going. Now, there are currently no creatures in the graveyard, so Soul Cauldron is not, able to add counters at current time. So With the Patchwork Automaton trigger on the stack, the opponent's going to crack their fetch and just absolutely hammer us with the Sublime Epiphany. Almost every single mode is live. They just don't have anything to copy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. So they're going to bounce our Monoskelion, counter the trigger, counter the card. We do get some stuff on the Ozolith for good measure. However, Scales is like famously a deck like you really have to think through the possibilities. So Ozolith's going to put the counters on there, which gets boosted by Scales. But now the opponent has put a creature in our graveyard, so Soul Cauldron's live to allow us to deal exactly 8 damage. So despite the huge Sublime Epiphany against us, we managed to kill them right afterwards. So that was just awesome. The first hand, just not enough mana and no green sources. I put a Strip Mine back. Honestly, like, I don't know. I could see actually an argument for putting Forest back and trying to Once Upon a Time into a green source. Maybe that's too greedy, you know. I don't know, but double Strip Mine is like pretty awesome to have in your hand, you know. All right, Arboreal Grazer. Sort of knew that was coming when you saw Highland Forest, you know, because they have to have a lot of lands with different names for their Field of the Deads, you know. So that was sort of a giveaway right there. So this is like a prime time deck that we're fighting against. Gonna fire off Once Upon a Time. And Strip Mine seems excellent in this matchup. Like, we're going to need to battle against their lands. Decide just to play Scales right now. Like, there's not something too crazy they can play on 3 mana. Alright, so they play a tap land and just pass to us. Now, the thing is, like it's... There's some times where you want to, like, fight the Strip Mine fight. And so you could see me, like, thinking, like, alright, do we want to play out like a 2-drop, or do we need to Strip Mine them right here? The problem with this deck is we don't have that many 1 mana plays. It's mostly 2 mana plays, and so we can't just start. We can't like play threats and start Strip Mining. Like if you had like Dragon's Rage Channelers and Ragavans, you can just keep, you know, on a really low mana count, just keep Strip Mining them. We sort of have to keep playing lands here, so you could see me thinking about starting town versus Strip Mine. Because the thing is, what I'm worried about is 4 is a magic number for them because that's natural order mana, you know. So you could see me like really thinking about it, but like I feel like I gotta put some pressure on them. We can't even attack through their stupid Arboreal Grazer. So decide just to let them, you know, let them go, and are immediately punished because they're gonna natural order right away. So at the very least, we have some defense with this, with our Strip Mine, but the opponent gets a couple lands in play, and going to play a Patchwork Automaton. Now, we're going to be able to start going off pretty well right here. Going to Strip Mine Field of the Dead just to try and, you know, stem some of the bleeding that's about to happen. Now, I'm mathing it out right here. I'm like realizing like we almost have a good double block against the prime time. And what it will take is boosting up our Automaton a little bit more. So as I'm like thinking about it, you know, I'm realizing, because we have like an active Steel Overseer also. But best case scenario, the opponent attacks and we can double block down the prime time. So going to play a Hangarback X equals 0 to get 2 counters on the Automaton. That way we end up with a 4/4 Zabaz and a 5/5 Automaton to double block the prime time, you know. So thinking optimistically here, that if we can just minimize it so it's just 1 attack from prime time. Of course, though, the opponent has a second copy, so now they get to grab 2 more Field of the Deads and already make a big army. And so that was basically, if they just didn't have the prime time this turn, where they either would have had to, you know, chump attack it in. Yeah, anyway, so that was just like, just pretty unfortunate right there. So the opponent's going to get to kill which of the 2 they want. And yeah, they're just going to leave the modular one behind. Strip Mine is something, but it's just too late at this point. Like, we can pop, you know, a Field of the Dead, but they still have another one and an active prime time and a million zombies already. So we're almost just dead to the swarm as it is, though we have some like reasonable blocks right here if the opponent sends in. So all right, Field of Dead's going off again, but this game's just sort of spiraling. Now the opponent cracks Blast right here, which is actually pretty devastating. Like, it's going to kill Zabaz and our Scales. And I didn't activate Steel Overseer in response because I wanted to keep the blocker up. But it's just too little too late at this point. The opponent can just basically just chump attack us down with a bunch of zombies at this point in time. So, however, they still have another natural order. So basically, they had it all. They even end up with the Crater Hoof, so we are just mega dead right there. On to the next one. That one was really tough. And friendly opponent on the other side. What do we lead with? So we have an Ancient Tomb that's sort of hiding underneath my name right there. And so I'm like trying to think of the fastest way to get to 3 artifacts in play so that Mox Opal's online. Decide just to lead with, ultimately lead with Hardened Scales and Mox Opal, but now that I think about it, I'm not sure that was correct. Well, I guess I wanted to maximize the counters on my creatures because we could have gone Ancient Tomb. Anyway, maybe it's too greedy. I don't know. That's a tough call. Because there is some value just to getting stuff on the board, you know. But everything's going to be bigger now that we have a Scales in play. So, Monoskelion, and then Ozolith. And awkwardly, now Mox Opal's online, but we can't profitably use the 1 mana. So this is not the best Mox Opal deck because we just have too many 2s. You need a lot of like 1s and 0s to make Mox Opal really shine. So I think it's still worth the inclusion off power level, but it's just, it doesn't have the most synergy in this build. And maybe that can be improved. So now one thing that might be abundantly clear to you by this point is this deck is like still missing some stuff. So we do not, the number one thing I think that would improve this deck is if we had Walking Ballista. That would be amazing because that would give us like a super strong thing to stick under Agatha the Soul Cauldron, to give us an easy way to battle against Ragavan and stuff like that. And it would, you know, Monoskelion is like our very poor approximation of Walking Ballista, you know. So that would really help. I also think it'd be really cool to have Arcbound Ravager, you know, because then you could really go crazy with the Scales stuff. And I'm not messing around with like Ink or Blinkmoth Nexus because Strip Mines are just rampant, you know, but that is something you can mess around with also. Meanwhile, the opponent appears to be on Show and Tell, but we are putting a decent amount of pressure on them. Going to play Steel Overseer, hoping this doesn't feed into a mana drain. Going to use Ancient Tomb. If it is Show and Tell, life total doesn't really matter, and I want to keep the colored mana up for Once Upon a Time. Alright, so opponent's going to crack their fetch, and you know, it's looking reasonable for us right now, but no, there's the Show and Tell. So now, not feeling so great, but since we get to put something in for free, you're going to fire off Once Upon a Time and just going to grab Patchwork Automaton. So I mean, we're going to get to put that into play for free. We'll have to see what the opponent drops in. Alright, so they drop in a Hullbreaker Horror. So there's some variation of the Show and Tell decks, you know. So the opponent attempts to Mystic Sanctuary the Show and Tell back on top, but we're just going to eat that with Agatha Soul Cauldron. So this is a huge turn right here. So, and this is where the math gets super complicated, because we have Scales and Zabaz and Ozolith, you know, so like there's like a lot of different things we can do. And the question is, for how much damage do we need? Do I need to pull a counter off Monoskelion right now with the floating Ancient Tomb mana that's going to disappear when you go to combat? So that's why my timer's burning down, because I'm trying to math it out. Now, going to attack with these 3 creatures, noting that the opponent can potentially bounce something with Hullbreaker Horror's trigger. So, going to attack in this manner and try and see how they deal with it. So, alright, so they're blocking the Automaton. Going to activate Overseer. It's going to put 2 counters on everything. And in response, the opponent's going to Brainstorm. So they're going to basically unsummon something. So there's Monoskelion. Now I'm trying to decide where, you know, do I need to like place a bunch of counters? And do I need to kill the Hullbreak Horror, or do I try and go for lethal right here? So that's what I'm running the calculations on. And because we need to keep mana up to pop Zabaz, the Glimmerwasp, to try and put counters on something. So that's why I'm like running through the calculations right here. So I'm going to shoot them with Monoskelion. Now this is the power of Zabaz right here. We're going to use its ability to destroy an artifact that we control on itself. That's going to trigger Modular, which is every instance is being boosted by Hardened Scales right now. So we're going to put it on our unblocked creature, which is now a 5/5. Hullbreaker is going to bounce the Monoskelion. Ozolith's going to pick up some counters. But because Zabaz put itself in the graveyard, now Agatha's Soul Cauldron is active. And so now on our unblocked creature, we get to place a couple more counters. And note that the Steel Overseer's ability was still in the stack, and so we managed to kill them through Hullbreaker Horror. So amazing win right there, and on to the next game. So this is why people get obsessed with the Scales deck, because there's those kind of scenarios, and we're like severely limited because we don't have Walking Ballista and Arcbound Ravager, but you could still get those crazy mathed out scenarios happening. I think it is a little bit of an uphill battle in Timeless, but you do get the benefit of Ancient Tomb and Strip Mine, so that's not nothing. Oh boy, here we go again. So Interlacer, another sort of Affinity build featuring Pinnacle Emissary. Alright. The opponent, however, managed to go first, and they are just going off right now. No legendaries yet for Mox Amber, but they already have just tons of counters on the Interlacer. Just absolutely ridiculous. Alright, Thought Monitor's going off. Alright, Pinnacle Emissary. So not a bad turn 2 from the opponent. Makes ours feel a little benign, so... Alright. We have up to 3 mana. I guess, let's see. Mox Opal complicates it a little bit. And there's also the sequencing. Like, sure, we can get Mox Opal online at the very end, but we want Hardened Scales ahead of the stuff we play. So it just makes it a little bit awkward. And maybe there's a better way to build the deck. I'm curious to hear if you have any ideas in the comments, like to try and fill out the 1-drop spot. I'm not sold on everything. Like Smuggler's Copter doesn't really fit the counters theme. It's just like an evasive threat that can hold counters or filter through your hand, possibly putting stuff in the graveyard for Soul Cauldron. So that was the justification, and you can Ancient Tomb it out, So there's some reasons to include it, but it doesn't always fit the synergy of everything else going on, So just a casual draw 4 cards off the Interlacer. Alright, another Thought Monitor. So the cards are just flowing. So that's one reason to play this kind of deck. So I'll link an Eggs deck that I've played. That's a deck that also can really churn through its library. So we're not that kind of artifact deck. We're mostly focused on just pure stats build up, whereas they're focused on drawing a ton of cards with Thought Monitors, Thought Casts, Interlacers, Tamios. They have tons of things. So once upon a time, I'm going to check how much mana we have access to, and I really want to strip mine them this turn to try and stem the bleeding a little bit. So I'm going to play Hardened Scales. That's why I grabbed the 1-drop, and Zabaz has a lot of utility as well. So I'm going to play Zabaz, and the opponent has a Metallic Rebuke. So maybe should have led with the strip mine to try and reduce their options. Maybe would have had to maybe try that post comp. Yeah, I guess if we were trying to build up counters on Automaton, there wasn't really a way to really avoid that counter spell, So, all right, so they're going to block with the Thought Monitor. Now we've seen this play out before. The opponent has basically infinite flying blockers, but a smaller amount of ground blockers. So just gotta start trying to chew through their stuff. Now the thing is, they already have really expendable stuff like Ornithopter in play, so it's not looking nearly as good. Now I'm gonna accelerate through this part because the opponent is just gonna play a million spells. But let me know in the comments, what's your favorite +1/+1 counter card? Is it a payoff like Hardened Scales, or is it an enabler like Steel Overseer? Or something else like Scavenging Ooze? Let me know. Alright, so the opponent senses blood in the water. They know that we're not long for this game. So, I don't know. It's so easy for them to flip Tamio, and then our creatures basically do nothing on offense. I'm going for the yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have blocked the Thought Monitor. It's tough because they have 2 guaranteed blockers. So the Zabaz does make things a little interesting. Now, this is the problem with Patchwork Automaton, it's sort of infinitely chumpable. So maybe we need Shadow Spear in here or something to help punch through. Now, our Stonecoil does have trample. The problem is we only have so many counters we can place on it. Like, we can have Zabaz blow itself up, and even with double scales, it's just not quite enough. It is super close though. Like, if only we had like an Arcbound Ravager, you know, to like place some more count, because then we would have it right here. So Zabaz is going to blow itself up, and we're going to place its counters on the Stonecoil Serpent. However, we get up to 8 power, and we needed 9. And so now we are tapped out, and the opponent has like 1,000,000 power to crack back at us with. So we're just dead, unfortunate. But that was pretty close. So we'll move on to the next game. This hand, love the Once Upon a Time hands, love the Ancient Tomb hands. So going to leave it Once Upon a Time to see what that tells us. The question is, do we want land or spell? You know, remember, you got to be not too greedy with lands, because you might just be getting strip mined, you know. So I could see an argument for just grabbing an extra land right there, but end up grabbing the Monoskelion. And what to lead with, and sometimes you want to lead with Hangarback Walker, because you'll have like odd amounts of mana. You can just, you know, activate its ability and help, you know, be mana efficient. Gonna lead with like the bigger creature here, so gonna lead with Monoskelion. Opponent leads on planes, could be energy, but usually they'd have like a 1-drop, you know, so we'll have to see. Definitely gonna just strip mine them, see if we can force like a Swords to Plowshares or something. And nope, nothing from the opponent. Alright, so this is when the deck can really shine, is like turn 1 Ancient Tomb, so you can keep playing stuff. Pair that with some strip mines, then all of a sudden the opponent's like in pretty big trouble. And so, you know, we have 4 power of attackers. The opponent has no lands in play. So they play a mountain. And we have up to 3 mana. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. Now the question is, do we get like a forest here to try and preserve life? The opponent does seem like they're sort of aggro. Or do we set up Zabaz's abilities with red-white land, you know? So decide to set up Zabaz's abilities and crash in with the Monoskelions. So the opponent's already at 14. Going to play a Hangarback Walker. And the thing is, they have 1 mana. They haven't even played a single spell yet. We have like a ton of threats on the battlefield. And the opponent has already seen enough, and they move on. So, you know, you can steal wins like that. You know, so that's like turn 1 Ancient Tomb into some strip mines is like really good way to start off. So Once Upon a Time into Ancient Tomb is great. Steal Overseer. Now one change I think you can make right away is get the 4th Once Upon a Time in there. It's just so strong. It helps you find the Ancient Tombs and strip mines like way more frequently, or you get the more important creatures also. But turns out Steel Overseer still threatening in 2025. So opponent, that's all it took to make them concede. And I don't know, just those kind of situations just make me laugh when they happen. So on to the next game already. All right, Once Upon a Time into Zabaz. We'll have to see where we go from here. Alright, basic planes from the opponent. The question is, so here, this is one thing, like the sort of higher curve of mostly 2s is messing us up, because if we had a potent 1 to play, we can go 1, strip mine their land, and then, you know, be sort of going off. But wanted to like get some threats on the battlefield first. Alright, so there's a Giada. Okay, so presumably facing angels, and we'll have to see what we can do. So we can really make some giant creatures, though Giada can also make some pretty giant creatures. So I'm going to just attack in with the Automaton. I would love to see this trade right here. I didn't think it was going to happen. And going to strip mine one of their lands. Now, could have played an X = 0 Stonecoil to try and, you know, punch past the Giada. But decided to wait. Alright, so opponent's going to exercise and kill Zabaz. Don't even get, exile it, so we don't even get the modular trigger, which is annoying. Now our mana is a little bit constrained. So Monoskelion. And I'm trying to figure out what to do. Like, so Stonecoil is good because it has reach. But here it's like a 0 mana, place some counters on stuff, and so we can attack them all the way down to 10. I think that might have been a little too greedy. Or at least we're immediately punished for it with an Archangel of the Tithes, which basically is like a pseudo ghostly prison, depending on whether it's like tapped or untapped. So it's like, you know, it makes you pay X1 for each attacker when it's untapped, and pay X1 for each defender when it's tapped, so it works both directions, and so it's just severely cramping our start here. And now there's a Lyra Dawnbringer boosting things even more. So we're gonna eat the Stonecoil in the graveyard for the Soul Cauldron. I don't even know where to put it. Like, I guess put it on a creature that could possibly start punching through their stuff. So Hardened Scales is interesting. And Zabaz is also interesting, but we're just like so constrained on mana. Like we not only don't have enough to like pop Zabaz and like, you know, throw counters to Monoskelion, but we also need mana to even like engage in combat against Archangel of Ties and stuff like that. So it's just, despite our big creatures, it's going pretty poorly. Alright, so opponent's going to destroy our creature. It gives us, I guess, another thing to exile with Agatha's Soul Cauldron at the very least. Alright, so opponent's playing it very cautious, but the thing is, like, we just can't, you know, Zabaz can gain flying, but we just don't have any mana, and it's pretty bad that they have so many lifelinkers. So that's a risk of this kind of deck. Like if you know, if the opponent plays something like huge, well, you just really can't deal with it. You hope to try and either grow bigger than it or just attack through it, because we don't have like very little interaction in this deck. Alright, so Smuggler's Copter, and we have one Mox Opal mana up, so going to pass. And the thing is, like, I forgot that Archangel of Ties taxes you when it's tapped and when you're trying to block, you know? So I was like, okay, well, I can do like block and then blow it up with Zabaz to deny them some lifelink, you know? However, to even block with the Smuggler's Copter, we're going to have to pay the tithe, you know? So it's just pretty tough. So just getting swarmed by angels, and this just seems like a nightmare matchup. Not to mention they have multiple main deck artifact destruction spells, so just a nightmare matchup. And Archangel of Ties is just really causing us problems. And this is where I'm realizing, like, oh man, I can't do the block blow up to deny lifelink, so opponent's just going to gain 1,000,000 life right here, which is going to put them basically out of reach, because our Patchwork Automaton's pacifism, our mana is just too tied up anyway. So we can place a couple more counters, but it's just sort of a lost cause at this point. So many times I've been thinking, like, what if Monoskelion was a walking ballista? How would that change things? And you know, it's just hard to imagine, but you know, it'd just be really excellent if that were the case. So on to the next game. All right, Devourer of Destiny from the opponent, and we're gonna see what they put in exile to try and understand what they're doing. And it seems to be like an Eldrazi build. So they have Ugin. We saw a Thought-Knot Seer, and then we see the Devourer tucked under Ugin's Labyrinth. And that is like a really juicy strip mine target, so we're just going to just blow it up right away. So I just assumed they'd put the Devourer back into hand, but they actually just cast a Warping Whale. I guess they just wanted to like accelerate their mana or just get on board. So they put the Eldrazi Scion into play. Now, since it's clear we're playing like an Eldrazi deck, I'll go ahead and link one of my own. I enjoy playing that strategy from time to time. Now, as far as like strip mine strategy and calculations, you have to remember that the spawns and scions represent mana, you know, so you have to keep that in mind. Gonna just hide the Mox Opal from them. This kind of deck doesn't really use hand disruption, you know. They're more likely to blow up artifacts with like random Eldrazi, so. Alright, no play from the opponent still. Trying to think about what to do. So this is the tough part. So 4 is a magic number for the Eldrazi deck that represents like Thought-Knot Seer, Sowing Mycospawn, but we need artifacts in play for our Mox Opal to do anything, and basically everything costs 2 mana, you know, so you could see me like thinking long and hard like whether I need to like strip mine right now, but like we would just be doing nothing for so long. Like we need to get to 3 artifacts so that Mox Opal is at least helping us out. So you could see me like really agonizing over what to play, and end up just deciding to put a Hangarback Walker into play, because that can allow us to eventually start profitably using whatever spare mana we have to like, you know, power up Hangarback Walker. So now the one advantage our deck has against these Eldrazi decks is they're often very equipped to deal with like colored stuff, like the Ugin Planeswalkers can only interact with colored permanents, whereas we have like almost all colorless stuff. So that's going to make, you know, like Devourer's trigger, for example. So that's going to make life a little more difficult for them. But there's the Sowing Mycospawn. I just thought for sure they're going to grab a Strip Mine, but they grabbed an Eldrazi Temple, which worries me a bit. It makes me wonder if they have like a big Devourer in hand or something. They could also be charging up a Kozilek's Command. So going to play Monoskelion, play Mox Opal, and just hold up Hangarback Walker activation. With Scales in play, it's going to get 2 counters, you know. Alright, there's another Sowing Mycospawn, so they're just chaining them together. Alright, so there's a Strip Mine. Okay, so they're going to attack, presumably, our Strip Mine to take away a little bit of our choice right there. Alright, Strip Mining, the Strip Mine, and yeah, they should not attack, and they correctly realized they should. Well, you know, we had multiple creatures anyway, so Hangarback Walker's growing. Our mana situation's super tight right now. Now, Patchwork Automaton's like a long-term play. So I've been holding off on Steel Overseer because of Warping Whale. Warping Whale is like such a clean answer to it. Going to attack him with Hangarback Walker and just see what happens. Alright, so the opponent is just going to take the damage. And it's at this point, like, Patchwork Automaton is like such like a long-term play. Steel Overseer seems like it's going to pay off much more quickly. So it will suck though if it gets Warping Whaled, because everything we played right now has been getting boosted by Hardened Scales, so it's been able to dodge Warping Whale. Alright, so it ends up just being a Kozilek's Command eating up our creature. So they're going to crash in. We're happily just take the damage here because we want to grow our creatures with Steel Overseer. We don't want to like just needlessly get rid of it at this point. Ancient Tomb's incredible right here. Now we can actually really start getting stuff in play. So, gonna lead with Patchwork Automaton to start picking up some extra counters. And the question is, do we play Hangarback Walker or Smuggler's Copter? And decide, the fact that we have active Steel Overseer makes me want to put a Hangarback Walker in play. So now things are looking a lot better for us. And going to just pass. I guess it could have just attacked at the Monoskelion. I don't know what I was doing right there. Alright, so there's a kick to Sowing Mycospawn. So that's going to gobble up our Ancient Tomb and get them another land. Alright, so they go for another Eldrazi Temple. So we're getting just absolutely blasted by our lands, but Steel Overseer has survived thus far, and they have the Strip Mine. Okay, so we are down to just our Mox Opal. And you can see how if I had Strip Mined too early back then, we wouldn't have been able to deploy enough artifacts, and then Mox Opal wouldn't have been on anyway. It just could have gotten ugly really quick. Alright, so there's a Thought-Knot Seer. So the opponent has just a ton of like the mid-range Eldrazi in play. However, we're going to be able to outsize them pretty rapidly. Let's see if they end up attacking at all. Alright, so they pass. Overseer's going to start going off. 2 counters and everything. All our cards are stranded in hand at the moment, so that's not great. Trying to think what the best attacks are right now. Trying to put them under as much, because they have planeswalkers and like huge creatures. Like they have some really strong stuff they can draw into. So, and we also have to make sure we don't just die randomly from like the crackback. So, all right. So opponent quad blocks the Automaton. And it seems like a good time to activate Steel Overseer, because that's going to allow us to take down 2 of their blockers. So we're going to activate Automaton. No, we can toss 1 damage with the Monoskelion if it's needed, and really want to kill the Thought-Knot Seer and draw a card. Maybe we can get a land, you know, and play another spell. So we take down 2 of their creatures, and we get the Thought-Knot Seer card. Which, if you're the Thought-Knot Seer player, you have to watch out if the opponent has like if you give yourself ring protection, you can protect yourself from getting your card back with Thought-Knot Seer. So if you're the ring player against Thought-Knot Seer, you need to be careful. Alright, so I have another Thought-Knot Seer, and then Eldrazi Repurposer. So they're really gumming up the board. However, their creatures are like at a massive size disadvantage. I was about to pass all the way through right here, but then I'm like, you know what? Anyway, our mana is so tight right now. I'm trying to decide if it's worth it to pop the Eldrazi spawn with 1 of the Monoskelion counters, and it seems like it is, because that'll just reduce their blockers, and now we have the starting town. Now, unfortunately, Starting town is going to come into play untapped. See, this is where like the fast lands are like super confused. You're like, oh, I could play my spell. No, you can't. So gotta be careful. Sending with these two creatures, each one of them is lethal, you know, so they have to do something. Both of them demand a block. All right, so they're going to kill the Monoskelion. I'm trying to think if it's worth it to steal Overseer right here, and decide, yeah, like it's just going to kill more of the blockers off. So they're going to be down to just one creature. Now we are at 10 life, you know, like there is like a world, like there are like crazy haste Eldrazi's, like I think Eldrazi Linebreaker. So we did happen to draw an untapped land, trying to see, but the thing is we already played our forests, so this is a quite like costly for our life total, you know. So going to put something into play, and I'm putting a Smuggler's Copter, that way we have like an evasive threat. But honestly, I should have been playing around Eldrazi Linebreaker, and probably should have just played the Patchwork Automaton, because I think Linebreaker would just win it for them right here. So the opponent attacks in for 3, and we're gearing up, and we managed to lock up the win. Well, that was pretty fun, and this definitely isn't like the strongest deck ever. Like you could see, we just definitely got slapped around by some show and tell decks and some other strategies, but it's very fun and very satisfying. I think it has a lot of room to grow as we get more of the powerful tools in Timeless, like Walking Ballista and other stuff like that. But there's still some fun things to do, like Hardened Scales into like Zabaz, and like there's a lot of cool things going on. Agatha Soul Cauldron is really nice. It's good at like breaking up strip mine locks and like messing with graveyard strategies. Like you could see it doing some work. I think you really should get the 4th Once Upon a Time in here. I don't know, just take out a Hangarback Walker or something. Really would love to get more like impactful 1-drops, like specifically creatures, but there's just such slim pickings. So like, I don't know exactly what to do in that front. Like we just need some more tools to work with. But you could go for like a little bit of like, you know, Construct Tribal with Metallic Mimic, but that just seems like way too slow, and like folds the Bowmaster, like just not really where you should go. Was originally leaning towards like Simian Simulacrum and stuff like that, but decided to lower the curve, go Lurrus Companion, and you know, this is one direction you could take it. I don't think like the Hangarback and Marketback Walker are that great, because we don't have like a consistent sack outlet, and there's just tons of exile removal, like, you know, Swords to Plowshares is king, you know, in Timeless. I mentioned the Nexus lands, like they are really good in other formats, but the other formats don't have strip mines, you know, so like I don't think it's worth messing around with that. Also on the utility front, there's Drannith Ruins, which could be good, but once again, it's just not really as great in like strip mine meta. Plus we need to like, besides like our colorless utility lands, we need to squeeze in like a bunch of colors also, so it's just really tough to get that much utility lands. But there could be some other ways to build this. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas. But yeah, that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.